Her voice was still echoing in my mind as I was walking along the streets of Kentucky. I didn't know where I was heading to. I was feeling broken. I had given her 27 years of my life, and this woman had forgotten the sacrifices I made to make every inch of her happy. I'm fed up with this life, this boring and same routine every day. I was made to enjoy my life, the vacations, the shopping, and the parties of the elite class. I'm done, Mr. Rob Parker. She was so frustrated with her life, and she left me that day to make her life better. My beloved Melissa filed a case against me, as I didn't want to divorce her. So I decided to hire the best lawyer, and for this purpose, I came to my hometown in Kentucky where I grew up. As I was walking along the streets, I had tears in my eyes. This was the place I had left for the sake of Melissa, since she didn't want to live in Kentucky, and my fate had brought me back. Hey Rob, I want to live in Tennessee after our wedding. Would you do this for me? She was holding my hand and staring at me. I did this for her happiness and left my beloved town on her demand. But who knew she'd leave me in the part of my life when I needed her the most? The days were passing, and I realized that she was quite serious about the divorce. The case was pacing very slowly, and we wasted 2 years fighting to get our opposite wishes fulfilled. Then I decided to withdraw from the case and divorced her to end this chapter, to end the frustration. I packed everything from Tennessee after the divorce and shifted to my hometown, as I didn't have any reason to live there. I was busy relocating and setting up my business there when my life decided to give me the most haunted experience. Hello there. Pack these tablets for 3 days. A soft melodic voice hit my ears, and I turned back to see that customer. A lady with light auburn hair and gray eyes was there to pick up the prescribed medicine from my pharmacy. The innocence she had on her face didn't let me move for a second. I thought to give my life a second chance and tried to extend a friendly hand to her. Susan owned a vintage boutique on the same street where my pharmacy was located. We started to meet up very often, and then she decided to move in with me in my home as our relationship had developed and had reached a point where we decided to get engaged. My son Dylan had completed his graduation, and he decided to stay with us for a few days to search for a job. I had set up a room for my son to make him comfortable. We were all happily living together until Susan went to a yard sale and bought something that ruined the peace of our lives. Hey Rob, check this porcelain doll out. It belongs to the 18th century. How cool is that, right? Susan was excited to have that blotched doll. She was always interested in vintage stuff, and that's why she was in love with this ancient doll too. We also found out that the doll was worth like $3,000 as it was so ancient. So Susan decided to place the doll in our home. She even crafted a cabinet for her collectible dolls in the room where my son was staying, as it was the most appropriate place, according to her. That vintage doll was not an ordinary one, but we were unaware of its reality. This doll looks kinda spooky, Dad, doesn't it? The day when Dylan returned from his job interview, he saw the new cabinet with the dolls and pointed to the vintage doll and asked me about it. Yeah, Susan fell in love with this doll and she had this whole thing set up, I explained to him. But Dylan wasn't feeling nice about it at all. I could see that in his eyes as Dylan was staring at the doll. It also felt like the doll was staring back at him. That night, Dylan went to sleep after finishing his work. He took a glance at the doll sitting in the cabinet and went to his bed. He woke up in the morning when he heard his alarm tone. He was yawning when he looked at the rocking chair placed beside his bed, and he suddenly stopped yawning right in the middle. The doll that was sitting in the cabinet last night was now sitting in the rocking chair. He got chills as he tried to remember that last night he had seen the doll sitting in the cabinet. Who in the world would place the doll here on the rocking chair? He was getting late for another job interview, so he put the doll back in the cabinet and didn't give it a second thought. He moved to the washroom to get ready for his interview. The next 2 days went without any noticeable event, and nobody talked about the doll. But on the 4th day, Dylan again saw the doll sitting on the rocking chair, and he quickly rushed towards the dining room where Susan was serving breakfast to me. "Hey, Dad, Susan, do you guys notice how creepy that doll is?" Dylan's heartbeat was a bit faster than usual. "Which doll are you talking about, Dylan?" Susan anxiously asked him, as she wasn't ready to hear the word creepy for any of her dolls. "That vintage doll, you call it. 2 days ago it was sitting in the rocking chair. I placed it back in its cabinet, and today it's, again, sitting on the rocking chair. How is that possible?" Dylan was starting to freak out. "What? How is—" "Let's go check it out." Susan wanted to speak, but I cut her off in the middle and asked everyone to go see what's wrong with the doll. Everybody went to Dylan's room, and Dylan got goosebumps when he saw the doll sitting in the cabinet where it used to be. "What are you talking about, Dylan? I don't understand." I was perplexed. It was right there on the chair when I came to tell you guys about it. Oh my God. This doll's a mess. I'm telling you guys, this doll. Are you done blaming my doll, Dylan? Didn't you like it sitting in its place? Please just stop this nonsense now." Susan interrupted Dylan and spoke in a harsh tone. "Son, I know it's a new place for you. Just focus on your interviews and stop drinking if that's what you're doing." I thought Dylan was maybe drinking a little bit too much alcohol. He had never really experienced it, so I thought this might be one of its effects. I patted his shoulder and walked outside behind Susan. Dylan was standing there with hundreds of thoughts racing through his mind, and he started doubting his own eyes. "I don't drink. I just took a few crystals. I'm not mad. How can this insensate doll walk all the way from the cabinet to this rocking chair? Has my mind gone mad due to the meth my friend forcibly gave me?" Dylan was murmuring. He had tried meth for the first time, but it didn't suit him, and he started vomiting. Dylan again bypassed this thought and went to have breakfast. That night, when Dylan was going to sleep, he stopped at the cabinet and started gazing at the doll. The doll was staring straight into his eyes. Then Dylan walked 3 steps more and stood at the left side of the cabinet and looked at the doll. The doll was still staring at him from that side of the cabinet too. Dylan blinked his eyes twice, but the doll was having a strange smile on its face and continued looking at Dylan. Dylan got goosebumps as he picked the doll up with one of his hands and looked around his room to see where he could lock the doll away so that it couldn't end up sitting in the rocking chair in the morning. Dylan saw a large chest placed on the right side of his bed, which was bought by Susan. It also had a lock and key inside the box. Dylan nearly threw the doll into the chest and locked it. He was having a victorious smile on his face. He knew he had beaten the doll in the game it was playing, and it couldn't get out of the chest. But Dylan was wrong. Dylan locked his room door and sat on his bed. He took out a folded piece of paper from his pants pocket and unfolded it. It had bluish-white crystals inside. Dylan was quite new to it, and that's why he was feeling hesitant. He took it anyway and laid on his bed. "Open the chest." Bang. Bang. "Open it." Dylan woke up with red eyes and found that his chest was being banged on by someone. He was a bit intoxicated, but what he was seeing and hearing was happening in front of his eyes. Every inch of Dylan's body was terrified, and then he ran towards my room with trembling feet. "Oh my God, no, Dad! Dad! Daddy!" Dylan was behaving like a child. I woke up and checked what Dylan wanted to say. When I opened the door, all I could see was my red-eyed, sweating son who was panting like he had been running for hours. Hey, what happened? I was shocked to see his condition. Susan had also woken up and she came to see what was going on. Dad, come with me, please! That doll! Dylan was stammering. He must have been having an increased heartbeat. I quickly went with him to his room and saw the rocking chair was swinging as if someone was sitting over it. We couldn't see who was there until we came closer to it. It was the vintage doll sitting on the rocking chair, and the chair was rocking with a fair speed. Oh my god! I locked this doll in that chest and the key was under my pillow! Look, it's right here now! Dylan was shouting out of fear and held his giddy head. I was also shocked to see the doll enjoying the chair ride. Susan hadn't come on Dylan's call. I picked up the doll and took it with me. I'm sorry, son, that I didn't believe you. You better wash your face and go to sleep. You're so freaked out. I'll put this sinister doll somewhere else. I hugged my beloved son, who seemed to be so tense, and made him sit on his bed. I came to the lounge and started to think about where I could throw this vintage, cursed doll. I had no idea what type of doll can enjoy a rocking chair all by itself. I went into the basement and walked towards the storage room. The store was full of boxes and other useless stuff that we didn't need anymore, so I threw the doll on the stuff spread on the floor of the storage room and locked it. I knew the doll can't get out of this locked room to enjoy the rocking chair ride. Good riddance, I mumbled. As I walked towards the exit of the basement, I heard someone was trying to move the knob of the storage room door, but I didn't pay any attention. It was Friday night, and as usual, Dylan was out to enjoy the night with his friends. Susan had some work at her store, and I was all alone trying to wind up my work so that I could enjoy the Saturday night with my family. As I had some guys from a pharmaceutical company who were promoting their medicines and had given me some samples, I was searching for those new formulas to make sure they were legal and useful. All of a sudden, I heard some strange voices that were coming from the storage room, which was at the back of the basement. It was like boxes were falling from the shelves and the stuff in the store was being shuffled by someone. I knew I was home alone as both Dylan and Susan were out for their causes. I picked up a wooden bar from the corner of the basement and slowly started walking towards the storage room, thinking that it must be a thief who was already there in the storage room when I locked the doll in the room. As soon as I unlocked the door of the storage room, I saw the doll slumped over on the floor near the door. I tried to find the intruder, but the storage room had no humans except me. I was perplexed and started to wonder if it was the doll who had thrown all the boxes from the shelf. I picked up the doll. It was looking at me with a strange smile that gave me chills. I locked the door again and brought it to my room. I locked the doll in my closet and decided to talk to Susan about it. The next morning, me and Susan were having breakfast at the dinner table when Dylan came in holding the doll in his right hand and threw it on the dining table. I'm telling you guys, I don't want this doll in the house! Dad, you locked it in the basement, right? How could it appear in my room swinging on the rocking chair again? I was shocked when I saw the doll. I had locked it in my closet after the incident of last night. Then how could it end up in Dylan's room? Susan, this doll needs to be taken seriously. I told you what happened last night. The doll was in our closet, and see, Dylan brought it from his room. What? When did you put it in your closet? Dylan asked, as he didn't know what happened last night. I told him and saw him holding his head in his hands. Susan, you have to understand. It's a vintage doll and we don't know what happened to it. Just throw this doll somewhere or else this ugly cursed doll will kill us. You'll see. Dylan did his best to tell Susan about the creepy doll, and then he walked away from the dining room without having breakfast. Susan was silently looking at the doll. She picked the doll up and placed it on a shelf in another room where nobody used to go. A few days passed without any unusual activity. We got busy in our routine and Dylan had finally gotten a job. He told me that once he gets his first salary, he'll be moving out to another apartment for which he would bear the rent himself. He was still not comfortable in my home, as a series of incidents that happened in the past few days had left us thoughtful.
Rob? Rob?
Susan was searching for me to have dinner since it was a stormy night and she had closed her boutique store. Dylan was out with his friends and Susan and I were alone in the home. Our electricity went out as soon as the storm had grown stronger. Susan heard voices from the washroom and thought I must have been taking a shower.
Rob, it must be dark there in the bathroom. Take this flashlight.
Susan had her mobile torch on and she knocked on the bathroom door to hand me a flashlight. After giving the flashlight, she came back to the dining room and decided to set a candlelight dinner to enjoy the stormy night. I had been fixing my solar energy setup connection for the last hour as I knew the electricity would go out due to the storm. My setup was disconnected since I moved into this home and I felt that it was high time to fix it. I was a bit drenched in the rain but happy to finish my work. I came down with wet clothes and found Susan standing in the lounge. The charged batteries that I had bought that day were enlightening my home so that I could see Susan had intense fear in her eyes. What happened, dear? Why are you standing like this? I had noticed her terrified eyes and asked her in a very polite tone.
You were at the rooftop setting up the batteries?
Susan's tongue slipped while speaking. Oh, yeah, I knew we would need it, so that's why I fixed it. You can thank me for this. Well, I'm gonna go take a shower now. Then we can have dinner?
Rob, I thought you were having a shower already. I handed the flashlight to someone who was taking a bath in our bathroom. Oh my God. Who did I hand the flashlight to?
Susan nearly screamed. No, I was on the rooftop, Susan. Maybe it was Dylan? I cleared my position and presented my option to calm her down. I entered my room to see who was having a bath in my bathtub. Someone was still there with the shower on. It sounded like someone was opening the bottle of shampoo. Hey Dylan, is that you? Come on out, son, I'm all drenched in the rain. I knocked on the door and waited for him to reply. Susan was sitting on the bed and silently staring outside the room. Dylan? Dylan! I was now banging on the door and calling my son to respond.
Yes, Dad? You called me?
Dylan entered the room as he spoke. He was moving his car keys in his hands as he had just come home.
Why are you banging on the washroom's door like this, Dad? You knew I was out. Why would I take a bath in your bathroom?
Dylan was surprisingly asking me, and Susan and I were more frightened to see him coming from the outside. If we're all three here, who's in the washroom? I mumbled. I turned the handle of the door. The door was not locked. There was someone in the sauna box. I couldn't see inside the glass walls due to the steam. Who's there? It was the most horrible moment I faced in my life. My heart was sinking and my feet were trembling. A few seconds later, the steam box door opened, and what I saw left me speechless. That vintage doll came out of the sauna bath without having wet clothes or a wet body. The way the doll was moving its neck was enough to make me scream. Oh no! Oh my God! I shouted and came out of the washroom where I saw Dylan and Susan standing. That doll is there! I failed to explain exactly what I saw in there. Dylan quickly moved forward and locked the bath's door. We three were looking at one another with questions, and were thinking about what we should do. Meanwhile, the doorknob turned rapidly at the knob and came out of the door. The door opened, and the sinister doll was standing at the edge of the bathroom. As soon as Susan put on some courage and came forward to pick the doll up, the doll dodged her and ran outside my room. We came out to find the doll, but couldn't. The doll was nowhere inside my house.
Hey, do you remember I had bought a maculated doll that belonged to the 18th century and also some other stuff from the sale 2 weeks ago.
Susan and I decided to visit that yard sale to ask some questions about the doll. Susan was trying to remind the old man about the doll.
Yeah, I do. What's next?
The old man, who was the owner of the sale, replied while keeping his stick aside.
Where did you get this doll from? It's a sinister doll. It's moving in my home. And
I was speaking without breaks when the old man interrupted me.
My grandfather was right. All the stories were true.
He sighed for a second and started coughing.
What? What's wrong with the doll? Tell us, please.
Susan was desperate to know about the doll.
It was my mistake. My grandfather wanted to throw this doll in a pit and set it on fire, but I saved it. After my grandmother's death, my grandfather's mental condition was not stable. He used to say that the doll had killed his wife, but nobody believed him. My grandmother had bought a few dolls from a garage sale, and she broke all other dolls and just kept this one with her. My grandfather said that other dolls were the family of this doll, and that's why it killed my grandmother, to avenge its family.
He coughed again and then continued.
After I saved the doll, I lost it somewhere. Then I heard many stories about it. People also said that it killed my grandfather and many others who wanted to get rid of it. I found it a few months ago in my old school bag, and then you bought it. And today I realized the stories I had heard about this doll were real.
Susan and I were shockingly listening to the old man's story. We told him everything. Sir, we know the doll is right in our home. Tell us what we should do if it reappears, I said desperately.
The only way to get rid of this sinister doll is to burn it completely and throw its ashes into the river.
The old man suggested the way out of the disaster. We took a deep breath and thanked the old man. We returned home and thought to sit on the couches and wait for the doll. Susan decided to prepare coffee and she called Dylan to join us. When Susan entered the kitchen, she started screaming her throat out. Dylan had also come out of his room and he rushed towards the kitchen along with me. The doll was sitting on the kitchen counter with crossed legs and had a kitchen knife in her hand. Within a blink of an eye, the doll jumped on Susan and tried to pierce the knife through her leg. Dylan quickly picked the bottle of wine up from the counter and smashed it on the doll's head. Consequently, it left Susan and ran under the dining table to hide. We both were finding the right moment to set the doll on fire. The doll emerged and jumped on Susan's shoulders again with the knife, trying to scratch her skull. Susan was shouting in madness. Dylan's brain was still working. He moved the stove button clockwise that turned on the highest flame. He rushed towards Susan, pulling the doll from her shoulders, and threw the doll onto the stove. As the doll was already drenched in wine, the fire promptly melted. The whole body of the doll was burning in flames, and the doll was trying its best to extinguish the fire, but it couldn't. I supported Susan as she was so frightened and crying badly. Dylan also sat on the floor as he had lost the courage to stand on his feet. We gathered the doll's ashes and put them in a box. Dylan went to the river to throw the ashes and act on the old man's advice. Susan was so ashamed to bring such a disastrous doll home. She promised to never buy any useless stuff again.